Hi guys, it's Eva and welcome to my March wrap-up of all the books I read in March. I think I read a total, well, I know. Why do I always say I think? I don't know. I read a total of 16 books in March. 4 of them were middle grade, so I'm going to do a separate middle grade wrap-up. I didn't get to, I think there was originally 6 or 7 maybe I had middle grade, but this year I'm not going to wait a whole year. I'm just going to put them on like future TBR lists and hopefully try to finish those ones up because they're books I do really want to read. And yeah, but there are 12 adult books that I read in March, and some of them were shorter books, and like a lot of them flew like really fast. I don't think I read novellas. I've read some novellas now in April because it's April 3rd, but some of the YA books were really short reads as well. So there was only like one like arduous read, but we'll get to that one. Let's just get started. Book number 1, I am not going to go into full review, is Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. And this is the 3rd in a trilogy, and I did the other 2 in my February wrap-up. Sorry, I don't want to point at you with a pencil. And then I finished this one on like the first day of March. And then I did a full wrap-up of like all 3 of the books. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this is the 3rd in the Grisha series. The reason I got into these is because I loved Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom by Leigh Bardugo. I absolutely love her as a writer. They were 3 solid reads. They're YA fantasy. And this is like towards the end of the story, but I read them because they are coming out to Netflix, this Grisha trilogy. And this main trilogy is all about Alina, who is the sun summoner, and like everybody knows her as the sun summoner now, and like she's like this saint-like character almost in this book about how she's gonna save their country from being taken over by like the evil or the darkness. There's a great like divide in the country at the time, and it's just like accomplishing getting rid of the darkness, and how do you go about that, and what do they have to give up, her and Mal, in the end, Mal and Alina. And a little bit of a love story in there, but yeah, it's just an end of a series, so I don't want to give too much away. I'm not going to hang on to here, but if you want to see the review for this, I'll go ahead and link that down below. And let me say this real quick, I made reviews on all these books except for like a few, because I'm going to do like a combined review, so I'll just let you know, but I'm not going to sit here and go, there's review. But anyways, book number 2 is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn, Hugo by Jenkins Reid. This was a highly anticipated novel for me this month because I had heard a lot about it last year and I never got around to reading it. And then I started with some of her earlier novels earlier in the year, and then I finally got onto this one. This one is set on the premise of like a Hollywood actress story, and she's like gorgeous and beautiful, and there's kind of some awe around her of why she has 7 husbands and who did she really love, and that's just kind of like the intriguing part and how you dive into the story. As far as me though, like liking the story in the end, I didn't like it all that much. I didn't connect with the characters. It was a solid read. It was done really well. It's just I didn't connect with the characters, either one of them. The main woman, Evelyn, and then the girl interviewing her is named Monique. And even in Monique's story ends up like in the end there's kind of a big shocking thing of why she's included, why she's the journalist, but I still didn't feel that much for her just because I wasn't really connected with either one of the characters. They just seemed, the main woman was very devious, and like it just wasn't intriguing for me. It was like every Hollywood story you kind of ever heard, this woman kind of did, and like there wasn't some kind of like warmth. She wasn't well-rounded to me in ways. But yeah, if you want to check out the full review, I'll link it down below as well. But I'm so excited to check out Daisy Jones and the Six by her. I absolutely love some of her other romance writings, and I think she's a very, very good writer. So I'm excited still to check out some of these. And then book number 3 was Superman Dawnbreaker, and this is by Matt De La Petta. And I read this one. I was so excited, and as soon as it came out, I ran to the library and got it, which I usually don't always do. I just like wait for it to check out and all that stuff. But I went and got it, and I loved it so much. It was the end of the DC series, which is so sad. And this, of course, follows Superman, and it's a young Clark Kent, and he's in this little town called Smallville, and there's all these charming characters. There's his best friend, Lana Lang, and a girl he's interested in, Gloria Alvarez, and there's all the positions of Clark Kent. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know why he's stronger than anybody else. He's kind of backed away, and he's raised by this really solid family, and they tell him that he's an alien basically, and there's all these little things going on in their town. There's like corporations like getting into stuff, and there's people gone missing. And so the whole thing kind of ties in, but it's very low-level detective work, and I love it as an origin story. It was really good, and I highly recommend it. Book number 4 is Run to You by Rachel Gibson. And I have read so many more Rachel Gibson books now. I've read a ton. And like the more you know all the characters, the better books become. And the more I know her style, the more I know what I'm expecting out of her books. Her books are very simple to usually. They're usually like, a guy meets a girl, there is one like problem, you know, and maybe that problem stems to some other problems. And that's it. It's not highly convoluted or like they're easy to get through. They're easy to read. So Run to You is a military, in her like military men category, but it links to like other people throughout her other books. Once you start reading more of her other books, you realize. And it's about a man who is a twin, and he was a Marine and his brother was a Navy SEAL. And he's like set on a mission for his friend to go pick up a sister who's related into another book. And this person didn't know she had a sister, so he goes to pick her up, and she knew that she had a sister all this time. So she knew the whole story. The Marine is Bo, and then the main girl is Stella. And they take a trip together to go back to meet this sister that she's never got to meet before. And of course they fall in love. It's a romance book. It's a romance book. There are some troubles in it just because I don't think Stella really knows where she's going in life, and Bo knows exactly where he's going in life and what he wants to do in life. But it's a cute little romance. I'd recommend if you like romances or like ones that are really easy to read. These, it's like, yeah, it's like eating candy, as I say. And then book number 5 is the comparable one to that, and it's what I love about you, and this is about Bo's twin brother. And this is about Bo's twin brother, Blake, and then it also follows a woman named Natalie. And Natalie, her story, the whole book starts out around her story, and she's just this girl, and she marries a guy and puts all her efforts into him, and he goes to college, and he graduates and gets a really good job in finance, and then he ends up running away with a bunch of people's money and a girl, and he gets arrested. And on that day she found out she was pregnant, and they were having a lot of problems becoming pregnant. So she's left on her own, and this is like a few years later. Her husband's been in prison for a long time. Of course, she's divorced by that point from him because he ran off with a woman. And she's been raising this child by herself. And then she runs into Bo's twin brother, Blake. And then Blake came there to seclude himself and to like face his demons. He's dealing with a little bit of PTSD, and he's dealing with alcoholism, really is what it is. And he's came there to face his demons and he just wants seclusion. But there's a little girl that lives next door that kind of comes over and gets in his business, and then Natalie, of course, is the mom, so that's where the romance starts. It was easy. I read these 2 books together because they were like highly linked, more linked than her other stories, and they were both cute, and I would recommend both of them. They're some of my favorite Rachel Gibson books. And book number 6 was another romance book, and it was 99% Mine by Sally Thorne. This one I listened to on audiobook, and I did like the audiobook. It came up, and I was like hem-humming if I wanted to read the book or not, and then it turned out I really liked it because I wasn't a bigger fan of The Hating Game, but I absolutely loved 99% Mine. I liked the story a little better. This story follows Darcy and Tom, and then Darcy also has a twin brother named Jamie, and Tom has come back to town, and she's always had a thing for him, kind of always been in love with him, and maybe he has too for her, but he had been recently engaged, had been dating a girl for a long time, and she had been like out and about, traveling the world, working all over the world, so she could go and live her life. She also does have one small issue with like a heart condition, and someone close to her has died, and that's what has brought her back to town, and she has to get rid of, or go through all the stuff, and then also like do up the house and sell the house. And this is Tom. Tom has been working his whole life in construction, and this is his very first construction job that he is the construction manager of, and this is his new business, and so he takes it very, very seriously, and it's like a whole thing through the whole book of will they, won't they, and I mean, they had chances in the past and they didn't take them to get together, and it's cute and romantic, and a lot of people don't like the characters, but I really, really liked them, and I would recommend it. And yeah. So that was book number 6. Book number 7 was a more serious romantic book, and it was The Light We Lost by Jill Santopolo. Now, this book gets highly rated reviews, right? Not like, you know, kind of basic romance books like these get 5-star reviews constantly. And I think originally in my head I was like, definitely 5 stars. It's a lot more to it than just like one issue in a romance, and it was well thought out and well done. And this follows the story of Lucy? Okay, so yeah, this follows the story of Lucy and Gabe and their 13-year relationship. Most of this story happens while Lucy is married to somebody else, but it's like Gabe coming back into her life and her having some like old past feelings, and then the whole time it's like she's writing a diary to him or talking to him, and you don't know why. You don't know why she's like rehashing how they met and how everything went and how when she saw him again, what feelings created there. And the book was really well done. I thought some parts of it did make me angry, and even in the end, some parts of it made me angry, but it was done really, really well. It was like authentic. These were like not unrealistic feelings or anything. And certain scenes where I was just like, yeah, I can relate to that I didn't typically hear those kind of romance connections like in other books. The only thing is I did feel bad for Darren, who is her husband, and then I also did feel bad that she put Gabe like on such a high pedestal, because it's kind of a lot to live up to, and their relationship was so much shorter, and I feel like she should have contemplated that a little bit more, that like what if in the long run like things would have probably been drastically different from them. But yeah, I'd highly recommend that. Of all the romance books, that one is a lot harder to read, and it's not as easy to read as the other ones, but it's still a good romance book. I don't know why. I think I'm just like in the mood lately, and I've just been like, whatever, this is what I'm in the mood for, and then I know it'll change up. I know I'll get bored, and all of a sudden I'll just be reading tons of fantasy or something. Book number 8 was Truly Madly Yours by Rachel Gibson, and I went back to this book because I think it was book number 1 in Truly Idaho, and I had read like the twin brother Blake. That book was set in Truly Idaho, and it was like book number or whatever in Truly Idaho. Well, this one was book number 1. So I was like, well, where did this story all start? So I went back and read that one because I was kind of interested about the other characters that had played in the other book. So I went back and read it, and it was like a decade earlier than that book, I think. It was a lot earlier. So they must have been a lot older in the other book. But this is about Nick and Delaney Shaw, and it's kind of a different story because Delaney gets adopted by a man, and this man already has a son who he has like denied and doesn't care for, and the kid is like 7 years old, and Delaney and her mother get adopted by him, and he wants to have kids with her mother. Well, they never end up actually conceiving another child, and Delaney, he is very, very nice to, but there is a lot of pressure under their household for her. And then Nick is like resentful and mean, but there is something about her he really likes, and he doesn't really ever get to know her. She's not allowed to hang out with him growing up and stuff. But anyway, they start a little bit of a romance when they're teenagers at some point, and then they get separated. And then this is like them, I think like a decade later, coming back to town. Delaney comes back to town, and it's them kind of working through their issues of both having the same father-ish. She was an adopted, and it was his natural father. The father had died, and it is kind of both them working through their issues with their family and then reconnecting them. I didn't love this story. I didn't hate this story. It was kind of middle of the road, Rachel Gibson. There were some things I didn't like about each character, which sometimes will just put me off for the whole book. Like in some of her other books, like I just didn't like the characters because of all their like internal monologue and everything. And Delaney seemed quite judgmental of a character in a way, even though she had like gone off and done her own thing. She still felt a little judgmental. And then Nick was just like, I don't treat women bad because I tell them how I'm going to treat them first. And so that means I'm not treating them bad. Just because you're like being mean to somebody and you tell them up front you're going to be mean to them doesn't mean you're not mean. And so there were some issues with me, like I just kind of didn't like the characters, like they rubbed me wrong, I think. And I think that's why I wasn't like just like in love with these characters. And I didn't kind of go on with the Truly Idaho series after that. And so yeah, this one is just, you could probably skip this one if you were reading, if you're a big Rachel Gibson fan. Same with the next one by Rachel Gibson. So this one I actually owned and I picked up, and I was like, oh, I have 2 of hers. And Both of the ones I have picked up are not my favorites by her. This one was an I'm in the Mood for Love. So I decided to try this one because it was like a different series, and it was her writer friend series, I think. It was just kind of a longer one of her books, and I've read some of her novellas, and I'm like, sometimes I read some of her books and I'm like, that could have been better as a novella. And this is one of those. This is Clara Wingate and Sebastian, and she's kind of known him a large portion of her life, but didn't really ever know him. He went off and became like a journalist who like traveled around the world, and he's really, really tired from being like a wartime journalist and stuff, and kind of wants to resettle down. And she is a writer as well. She's a romance writer, and her mom doesn't like her job basically because her mom's a very hoity-toity kind of person and wants her daughter to have a very respectful job. So there isn't a huge like rift between these two. I don't feel like there was a big, and the book was just too long for that almost in a way. There wasn't huge problems for these two to overcome. I thought anyway. So I just thought the book was just a little bit too long. So yeah, this is not one of my favorites. And the next one was The Gilded Wolves by Roshani and Chokshi. And this book I've been reading for over a month and a half. I think I started it in February and I didn't quite finish it, and I switched to audiobook in March, and I was like trying to read a chapter here or trying to read a chapter there because I couldn't just sit down and read it. And this story, like I said in my review, has like all the things for a good story. Like it has an original setting, it has a fantasy that I've never read before, and the characters are unique and the characters are different. They're not kind of the same characters I've read over and over again. And the magic that happens in it is like different than I've read. So it kind of has all the things that you want for a new exciting fantasy, but I just couldn't get into the book. I should have like DNF'd it or DNR'd it or whatever you call it, like did not finish or did not read. I should have just put it down, but I really, really wanted to like the book, and I wanted to know what was going on in the romances. Obviously, I was in a super huge romance mood, but I couldn't focus on it. I started the audiobook and I finished it with audiobook, but I didn't like the audiobook. I didn't think it was well done. I didn't think the characters were chosen like appropriately. I had listened to those voices before in other books, and I thought they did really good in other books, but it was just like the wrong characters in these books for some of them. So that threw me off as well, but I could not sit and read the book. So the audiobook was better. And I couldn't get into it. I couldn't like it in the end. I barely knew what was going on by the end. I was like following the romances, but like I would always have to be like, focus, what's going on in the story? Focus, what's going on in the story? And like, I just couldn't. I don't know why. Maybe it was just like my train of thoughts, but I couldn't follow these ones. So I didn't really like it. But I would love to read other things by the author if it's not in this line of series, because I think I'd get a little bit lost. Or maybe the second book, because sometimes I read first in series and they're not good and I don't like them, and then I love the second one, so I'm not sure. But yeah, this is a bit of a harder read. It was definitely the hardest read I read in March. So book number 11 was After We Collided, and I did not do After We Collided by Anna Todd, and I did not do a review by After by Anna Todd because I felt like when I did it, I didn't like it because it was just kind of mean. I didn't like the book. And I was excited for the movie, but the book did keep me intrigued to read it. And so then I waited about a month and a half to read the second one because it came up, and I was like, well, I'll just go for it. It's got to be better than the first. And I heard it was better than the first, so I went for it, and I thought maybe it'd be part of like the movie. I haven't seen the movie yet. It comes out in a few weeks, I think. But anyways, it was surprisingly so much better, and I'm so glad I like read it and like gave the author a second chance. And the first book was like really repetitive for me. I didn't like the characters. They were quite mean. Like sometimes you can love a character who's mean because an author writes in like redeeming qualities that you just like them still. But I didn't in the first book. I wasn't rooting for them as a couple. I was just kind of really annoyed by them. The second book wasn't as long, I don't think. It seemed to go by faster. The first book was way too long for a romance, and the second book was still quite long. I still had that feeling of like, this is too long of a book. And for what it is, because there isn't anything epic or life-changing or changing me as a reader in these books. Like, just for what it was too much of a long read. The writing was so much better. The first book, I noticed a lot of grammar and like syntax errors, and the second book, the writing was so much better. Anyways, the first book was probably like a 1.5 because 1 I would say I would DNR it and wouldn't finish it, and 1.5 is like I finished it but I didn't like it. This one like jumped up a whole like scale. It's like a 2.5. So it's not like the best romance I've ever read. A lot of romances I read get like the 3-star mark, but for an author to jump up that high, I was like really, really impressed. Like her storyline was better. The whole thought behind the storyline was better. It wasn't repetitive, and the writing was better. The grammar was better. The syntax was better. And the only thing is like it cut off really weird. It was like she was still writing the book and they were like, nope, cut it off here and add like a cliffhanger. Like it didn't finish right for a normal book. Like the ending was like a little bit off. It's the same characters, Tessa and Hardin, and they're still working through the relationship. And I get it. They have a lot of problems to work through, and they're young, and they're working through them together, and it's hard. Some of the stuff is a bit repetitive from the first book, and I liked the characters a little bit more. You got more well-rounded characters in this book as well, I thought. And so I don't know if I'll keep going on with it, if people tell me to, if they liked it, because some other people I know are reading it around me. So maybe if the next one's even better, I'll probably go on with it. I was so impressed with the writer. I was really, really happy that this book turned out so much better than the first. And yeah, I mean, if you read the first one and you were hesitant, I would recommend the second then. Yeah, I would. I definitely would. But if you're just going to watch the movie, just go ahead and watch the movie. And then the last one was Blue Bayou by, this was a novella, and it was by Rachel Gibson again. And Blue Bayou, I wanted to read it because she had the 2 military men, which the 2 twin brothers I had read earlier, and the only other one in that read was Blue Bayou, and it was the first book, and the first book was a novella, and I was like, you know what? It's like 75 pages. Just go ahead and read it. And then I was like, you know what? I didn't need to read that because you met the characters in the first book. I mentioned you, Rendio. And so I was a little bit intrigued what happened, but their story was so short, and it was just like, there was like no complications barely in it, and it went by like that. But it was set in Louisiana, and it's set in these big grand old houses. If you've ever been to one of the plantations out by New Orleans, and people pay money to go give money there, and there's a guy next door. He has a big grand old plantation house as well, and people don't visit his. I think he's in the middle of upkeeping it. He is ex-military as well. She knew him when she was about like 20. He was like 21 and she was younger, and they met and they had relations, and he just up and left after it and like didn't say anything. Apparently he was scared because he didn't want to stop his life, and he didn't for her. He went on for like decades more or for a decade more, and did his military career, and then came back, and she was still single. And they met up again. And then the story was sweet and quick, and it's very, very, very quick to read. So if you want to read it, go for it. But I don't think it's necessary. If you like the other 2 books, The Military Men, those are good enough. You don't really need to know that story, I don't think. But those are all the books I read in April. Sorry there was so many romances. It's just, that's what I was in the mood for. There was like 9 romances in April. But some of them were really short, and some of them were really easy. And there was like a few like really good quality romances I thought I read, and I would definitely check out Superman. It was so good. But I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.